Ms. Katie Arrington is the current Chief Information Security Officer for Acquisition. In this position, she serves as the central hub and integrator within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment to align acquisition cyber strategy. As the cyber lead and programmatic analytic advisor for strategic cyber programs, Ms. Arrington is responsible for conducting analysis within the major defense acquisition program portfolio and across the DoD. This cross-functional analysis will ensure transparency within the acquisition strategy, interoperability between enterprise networks, and compliance strategies for cyber initiatives. She also meets with key cyber personnel across both DoD and federal agencies, as well as legislators, to ensure that changes made in the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, are supporting and reaching the goals of decreased spending and increased compliance with current and future standards. The final focal point will be on protecting the department's intellectual property and data and securing our weapon systems and critical infrastructure. Before assuming her position at OSD, Ms. Arrington had an extensive career as a legislator and senior cyber executive. Ms. Arrington was a candidate for South Carolina U.S. House of Representatives in 2018 and in South Carolina State Representative for 2 terms. He has substantial experience and capabilities in cyber strategy, policy, enablement, and implementation across a wide range of domains, including DoD, federal, healthcare, and state. She acquired her experience in cyber over the past 15 years with Booz Allen Hamilton, Ventura Corporation, and Dispersive Networks. This has given her the unique experience of working at a large business, small business, and non-traditional contractor for the government. And she has attended the Canisius, she can correct me. Sorry for coming up to alma mater. In Buffalo, New York. Miss Katie Arrington, the show is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me, and I so appreciate that introduction. And you are 1,000% right. I did not want to cancel this trip until they actually said, we're banning your travel, Katie. So I have been spending the better part of a year going out and engaging communities. And the Michigan community holds an incredibly special place in my heart. My first husband, my baby daddy, Grand Rapids, Jenison, born and raised. But more importantly, my mentor is Mr. Kevin Fahey, and the Honorable Kevin Fahey, and the linkage that he has to Michigan, to everything up there, and why we're doing this whole CMMC comes from his time up in Michigan and the community up there. So thank you all for dialing in this morning. I will get right into it. So in the Pentagon, I can't see the PowerPoint presentation because our networks, we are throttling to ensure that we're giving all the capability to those people. We have teleworking right now, which your Department of Defense is doing an amazing job. For our inside the building, we have reduced by 80% the actual people in the building. So we have teleworking going on, and it is amazing what is happening. So what I believe you guys are looking at is a presentation that we have out there, and just to make sure, it's our overview of the CMMC. So if anyone, and generally when I'm in an audience, I can see you and say these things. So I'm going to give a quick upload of what the CMMC is, why we're doing it, and where we are currently with the CMMC. Then I will walk through how implementation is going to occur. I'll give an update on the accreditation body, and then I'll turn it over to questions from the audience that you all can ask me. I'm pretty good at answering them. Generally, if I can't answer it, I get an answer published on the website within a day or so. But since I joke around the mommy of the CMMC, I can pretty much answer anything about it. So why the CMMC now? Why we're doing this? There's one, big reason. The U.S. As a whole is losing about $600 billion a year. That's per year that breaks down to $4,000 per U.S. citizen after taxes from data loss, exfils, and straight up cyber espionage from our adversaries. And the list goes, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and then, domestic as well. Why this is happening is because the most vulnerable in our supply chain, the people that we need the most, don't necessarily think about cyber and the cybersecurity of their company or their networks as a number one priority. When I talk publicly, I've made this statement. So those of you on the call that have heard this, I do apologize. But cybersecurity kind of snuck up on us. I remember my Razor flip phone. It was hot pink, bedazzled in Swarovski crystals. And I frantically remember clicking the letter B to spell out, my first son's name is Christian. So, I hit the B, 3 times to get C. It came up on us. And I joke around, when Al Gore invented the internet, he had no idea what he was creating. Now, here we are. And we missed something between, my generation and my children's generation. My son's 29 years old. My daughter's 29-year-old daughter, 26-year-old daughter. And the way they think about cybersecurity and the way I think about cybersecurity are very different. And companies are in that same vein. We, when I say I'm 49 years old, I graduated high school in 1988. When I had to develop critical thinking skills about how I thought about things, I was sent to the library, and we were sent to the library to write a book report. And we had to have critical thinking around, okay, the time I needed to set aside to get the book report done. I needed to read the books. I need to be able to write about them. I need to be able to derive my own thoughts. But there was also another piece to it. We had to think about where we were getting the data from. We had to look at the copyrights on our encyclopedia. I was in upstate New York, and some of my copyrights, Lincoln was still president. So I had to take that with a grain of salt and look to ensure, had things changed since then, but we created critical thinking skills. What happened with cybersecurity is we missed that because it happened so fast that we were all moving at the pace of technology. And when technology was, getting doubled every 6 months, every year for the better part of a decade, we just didn't keep tabs on it. And then here we are today. And we have, and the unique thing about cybersecurity is that every person on the planet, one way or another, is connected by cybersecurity. They may not realize it, they may be in a really rural part of Africa, but how they get the vaccines to that rural community of Africa is all done via cyber. We all have this interconnectivity of things. The internet is kind of the string or the spider web that loops us all together. But it also creates an enormous vulnerability. And I liken the cybersecurity, the technology, to fire. When man first was introduced to fire, we had to understand the risk associated with it. At first, it was warm and he put his hand towards it, and the closer he got to it, he burned his hand. So we realized the risk associated with that was you don't touch fire. That's a risk. You could harness the technology to heat your home, to heat your hut, but you couldn't touch it. And you learned risk mitigation practices to protect yourself, your home, against the technology. The CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, is the cybersecurity basic hygiene on how to deal with the technology of cyber and understand and mitigate the risk of using it. We are never going to be 100% secure. That is a guarantee. What we can do, though, and what we should be doing, is buying down the risk and buying up the uncertainty. And in that delta, small businesses will succeed, large businesses will succeed, but more importantly, our democracy will succeed. We always have. That's been the delta that's made us the greatest nation on this planet, and we need to remember that. Now, the CMMC started, we're losing $600 billion a year. There were several reports out last year that very clearly stated that we were missing the fundamentals. There was something called the DoD IG, Inspector General Report on Contractor Networks, that said that there were three big things that we were all missing, the DoD and our industrial base. A, we weren't updating our passwords. B, we weren't using two-factor authentication like we should. And three, we weren't marking the data appropriately and flowing it down the supply chain appropriately. There was also something called the Navy Cyber Readiness Review that was released in the springtime of 2019. Really informative paper, basically said we are not where we need to be as far as cybersecurity goes. There was also something called Delivered Uncompromised by MITRE. It was a report that they did on the just how do we deliver uncompromised in the cyber environment? How do you deliver product in a cyber contested environment? And there were all fundamental things that they were saying. The first things first is that we needed to have a unified cybersecurity standard, to which we did not have in the Department of Defense. And I'm sorry, I'm not even paying attention to the slides. It's probably best if you can flip through them. It'll all make sense while I'm talking to you. But this is, the fundamental core of why we need it. A, we were missing the basics. We weren't all changing our passwords. As a small business, you're coming in, you're getting a new employee, they were bringing their cell phone in. You may have Gmail as your company mail. You may have a GoDaddy, and they were downloading it on their cell phone, and off they go. There was really no accounting for did they change their password. When they get a laptop issued, who's maintaining those? Those were simple, basic cyber hygiene practices that a lot of small businesses just didn't think about because it was, we're innovative, we're moving quickly, we're moving at the speed of technology and the speed of getting work done. So that stuff didn't really come along. It was more, the technological aspect. It was convenient, and we were doing it, and we wanted to be successful. So what we created in the DoD, having all of those reports come into us almost at the same time, knowing how much money we were losing, we created a unified cybersecurity maturity model certification. Now, a little back history. Those of you on the call who know what DFAR, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation is, there's a DFAR called number 252.204.7012. This was put into effect when President Obama in 2014 signed an executive order making the NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, special publication 800-171R1, which was how the Defense Industrial Base would protect controlled unclassified information, CUI. There were 110 controls in the NIST, and companies, it was started to be inserted in 2014. It had to be fully implemented by 2017, that all companies that were touching CUI, controlled unclassified information, were to self-attest that they were NIST 171 compliant. So we have everybody, right now it's in all DoD contracts that have CUI, and all of these companies are attesting. The challenge is, if they were really doing all 110 controls, we wouldn't be losing $600 billion a year. Now, is industry doing this with malicious intent? Absolutely not. There was no accountability. There was no audit process. The controls in NIST are brilliant, but they're hard for small businesses to adapt and understand. Especially if you're, a small business and you really don't have an IT person, or you don't have a chief information security officer. That those are things that are a little bit, I say it's Latin to them. And it wasn't out of malicious intent. It's just, okay, I'll check it off. I'll look at it, and I want to get the work, so let's move forward. Also, at the same time, realizing that different branches of the services were asking businesses to find and get to different cyber standards, right? So the Navy, Secretary Gertz released a memo in the fall of 2018 saying he wanted all the highest and best security on every system. Well, what did that really mean? And we needed to be able to commit and translate to industry a very concise message about cyber standards, controls, and how we're going to audit them. We don't have the ability in the government to go out and audit every single company within our supply chain. There are 300,000 companies in our supply chain. We needed to be able to convey to them, just like we do on quality and safety. You, as an industry, you have something called the ISO, the International Standards Organization. ISO has a various amount of standards. You hire a third party to come in and audit whether you're meeting the particular ISO standard. The Department of Defense relies on that ISO certification to validate that you are capable, that you understand the risk, and that you're doing all the risk mitigation practices in to deploy whatever it is. And I'll use, for safety. That's how we define safety. If you know any history about the ISO, know how it came to life. After World War II, the Department of Defense had something called the MIL spec. The MIL spec was how we defined quality and safety to our Department of Defense manufacturers to ensure the safety and the health of our workforce. At the same time we created MIL spec, NATO created, because we started doing global development of weapon systems at this point, the NATO standard, which was very alike to the DoD MIL spec standard, but the output of a lot of the controls were the same, but the way they described them were different. This caused a little confusion. So what ended up happening were those two standards came together and created the International Standards Organization. And that way we all had a level understanding of what would be needed to do quality, safety, and since then ISO has expanded. I personally, and the DoD looks at CMMC as the next global standard. It is a standard that was created from industry and academia over the past year in a very collaborative engagement. Listening tours, we've gone across the country, we've put it out for public comment, we've opened the doors at the Pentagon because we needed to hear from the business community what were the things that would create the most security, what were the right things to do, and created the CMMC so that all Department of Defense contracts would have a unified cybersecurity standard, that industry would only have to get certified once every 3 years to be able to work within the Department of Defense. So welcome to the CMMC. We are looking at, the PTACs, number one. They're going to be incredibly impactful to the small business community on the transition to the CMMC. We are looking and engaging to bring the PTACs in to the CMMC accreditation body. The accreditation body has stood up. They're a Maryland-based 501c. They have nothing to do with the federal government or the Department of Defense. They have stood up from a coalition of the willing of industry and academia. The DoD is transmitting the model, the way it looks, and the CMMC accreditation body is the only institution that can train, approve, and certify C3PAs, cyber third-party authorization organizations, and auditors of the CMMC. Those are the only people, if they graduate, get tested, and certified from the CMMC AB. An auditor goes out, is hired by the company to get audited. The only accreditation that we will accept is from that CMMC AB in the Department of Defense. So we turned over the model to them. They are developing the training and curriculum, and we were tentatively scheduled to release the first round of training open to C3PAOs, or individual auditors, at the end of April. COVID-19, we didn't anticipate that. We are working to do online training to keep us on schedule, but know that that is the only thing keeping us off of that kind of schedule, is making that those deadline dates to have training, and I just don't know where we'll be. Stay tuned on that. But our first initial training, we want to bring in the PTACs. We want to get them trained and ready to help industry get ready for the assessments. The next thing is that the CMMC is based on maturity, levels 1 through 5. CMMC level 1 is equal to the FAR 52. There is a current federal acquisition regulation, FAR 52. You can see it in the deck. There are 17 controls. They are no cost to implement. They are just processes. All we are asking for level 1, to which over 90% of the supply chain will only ever need to get CMMC level 1 certification, which just gives you the basic cyber hygiene, like the password example I gave you in the very beginning. And having you as a company call in to have an auditor to come in and validate those no-cost 17 controls, but to also do a few other things for our supply chain. Because there is a physical trusted agent of the government coming to validate the small businesses' location, that there's really someone there, we're going to buy down the risk of shell companies. Secondarily, we're going to buy down the risk of CFIUS or foreign ownership within our supply chain, because our adversaries have been very diligent on working on breaking our supply chain, buying it up, putting small businesses out of business. The CMMC is at basic level to buy down the risk and buy up the uncertainty for the adversary to affect our supply chain. The level 2 CMMC, there are 17 controls in level 1. There are 130 controls in level 3. We created the level 2 to help small businesses, primarily in PTAX and small business, administration, to help the small businesses plan on the business plan to go to CMMC level 3. It's a big step. There's, you need to have, do you need to hire people? Are you going to internally resource this? Are you going to externally resource this? Is this going to be something that you implement cybersecurity as a service as how you're going to get to this point? Do you have the funding? Are you bidding on the right work? Level 2 is all about helping businesses map to get to level 3. CMMC level 3 is the instantiation of the self-attestation, which is required by contract today in the DFAR clause I mentioned earlier. There are 110 controls in the NIST. We added 20 additional controls, and so everyone is very aware we are in the process of doing a DFAR rule change to make those 20 additional controls an allowable cost, because we're asking industry to do them, and the cost of the certification in an allowable cost to bill back to the government. We are in that process. Just like the training, it was scheduled, OMB OIRA would have a public hearing late April, early May. I don't know where that stands with COVID-19, but we will keep you well aware from our website and the accreditation body's website on when that hearing will be, because we do want everybody from industry, because we are going to impact the U.S. economy by doing this, more than $100 million. So we do need to make sure that we're all aware of the cost of this. So we have level 3, then we have level 4 and 5. Level 4 and 5, if you are tracking any of the NIST conversations, that is what originally started as NIST 800-171. They called it Bravo. Now they call it NIST Special Publication 800-172. Those are very, very specific controls and things to do for our most critical technologies. Level 4 and 5 will be used very sparingly in Department of Defense contracts. 0.06% of all DoD contracts will actually use level 4 or 5. Now, taking all of that, we are still on target to start releasing RFIs in June of 2020 with CMMC in the market surveys and requests for information. Now remember, because this is a maturity model, and we understand that with security, one size does not fit all, there will be multiple levels in contracts for CMMC. Here's an example. If a contract is let for boots, that's all on the contract that you're doing is buying and making boots. The only CMMC level that would be required for most of that contract, I can't find another reason why, would be CMMC Level 1. We want the basic cyber hygiene skills in place for any business doing business with the DoD, because we need to ensure you're going to be there, that you have the structure, you understand how to buy down the risk and buy up the uncertainty to maintain your cybersecurity so your business can remain open. If you were to be doing a contract, and I'll use an example of an M1 Abram, the prime on that contract would probably need to be a CMMC Level 3, because CUI would be transmitted in some form or fashion. But the subcontractors, depending on the flow down of the CUI, the Controlled Unclassified Information, unless otherwise stated, would only need to have a CMMC Level 1. Because unless the prime had selected the sub and said, okay, I need you to be able to ingest CUI, they wouldn't need to have a Level 3 certification. That doesn't mean your company can't go and try and become Level 3, or you shouldn't want to. We're just saying that in the government, we understand how much money we should be allocating to secure particular products, services, and how much others should be. An example in very basic term, we're going to spend a lot more money securing hypersonic than we are on the manufacturing of a boot. That's why we created a maturity model in the CMMC, so that we could aggregate and tell industry clearly and concisely what controls, what processes they needed to be doing to protect themselves and protect the information they had. As we go through the rule change, which is, like I said, it's going through, it will be finalized in October of 2020, and then you will start seeing the CMMC in RFPs in late October, early November 2020. We are estimating right now we'll have about 10 contracts released in 2020, 10, throughout the whole of the Department of Defense. These are our pathfinders that will have the CMMC in them. We will have the trained and certified auditors coming through the training classes at the same time, so that we can start getting, when the RFP and RFIs drop, the community of interest, the companies that are interested in bidding on that work, assessed and certified through that process. We will not require the CMMC level of certification until contract award. So think about it. We're releasing the RFIs in June. The model is currently available out there for small businesses. It's really easy to read. We listed every standard and certification we took across the globe and ingested into the CMMC, so that everybody could have a clear understanding of what they needed to do and how to prepare. And as we move through this, even with the RFPs released, companies will still be able to get certified, because it's only required a contract award. So we're doing our utmost best to help industry make sure that we're keeping everybody on the line as far as the expectations of what we can do, how we're going to go about it. So that is, that whole presentation in a nutshell. I've gone through it. Then in 2021, we will see, the amount of contracts as we work through these pathfinders, we work out the kinks in the system. We will work, get through that. And with the DFAR rule change, it needs to be in all Department of Defense contracts no later than 2026, January 1st, 2026. So just like we did back when I talked about President Obama and the executive order making the NIST 171, 2014, we had to have it in contracts by 2017. We're doing the same process. Why we took 5 years is because we cannot insert the CMMC into any existing contract, because it would not come at a no-cost mod. There would be a cost associated with it. So we have to go the full acquisition cycle. So if you're currently doing work with the Department of Defense, you will not have the CMMC inserted. It will be as that award comes to recompete, or a new RFI comes out, because most DoD contracts are 1 base year plus 4 option years. So I couldn't impart the CMMC into that 5-year acquisition cycle. Does that mean that the companies shouldn't get prepared? Absolutely not. Because if you have that DFAR clause 7012 in your contract today, you're already telling the federal government you're doing the 110 controls in the NIST. You're already telling the government by the FAR clause you're doing the 17 controls in the FAR clause 52. So you should not wait, and that's why we're ramping up with the PTACs to get them set up. We're working with the Office of Small Business within the Department of Defense. We're working with our primes, our large primes, to get supply chain awareness, because all of this is about ensuring our supply chain, and cybersecurity is a piece of it. It is not the end-all, be-all. There is a lot to this. The CMMC is, I say, if you were to look at the cyber war, and you look at, the warfare, CMMC is like the tracks on a tank or the wheels on a truck. The armor is encryption. There's multiple pieces to security, your physical security, the locks on your doors, all of that. All of that is part of security. The CMMC is one part. It just happens to be something that, the department is really, as the U.S. economy, and we realize how dependent we are on cybersecurity, making sure that the most valid and trusted people within our national or defense industrial base are our business partners, are you that are on the phone, that you're the ones who make or break us. If you're not there, we don't have a national defense. We in the Department of Defense build very, very few, if anything. We do everything via contract work, and we needed to ensure that you guys were as secure as you could be and poised in the best places possible for your business to ensure the stability of the supply chain, to ensure that when we need you, you will be there, that you won't, be suspect to cyber espionage, exfils, ransomware, as, our adversaries are not taking a seat back. But that is, I'm coming to my 10-10 time. I will wrap I hope I gave a really good overview of the CMMC, why, who's doing the implementation, who's doing the accreditation, the audits, the business process behind it. So I will stop talking and open myself for Q&A now.
Great, thank you, Katie. We really appreciate it. I have a few questions that have come through the Q&A that I will pass along to you here. The first one is, who do we contact if we want to be a CMMC trainer?
So if you want to become, you go to the CMMCAB.org. That's the accreditation body website. There's a portal. They ask for your information, and they will start putting you on their blast, their email, on when training will occur, what the requirements are. All of that is at CMMCAB.org.
Great. Next question is a little more specific here. So the question is what are the environmental scoping expectations? For example, if we are referencing enterprise-wide and advising a global organization with worldwide presence, do we limit our scope and assessment to the U.S. segment of the enterprise or the government-related operation?
So the CMMC is already being looked to be adopted by our global 5I partners. Many, when you look at the model itself, you'll see something called the UK Essentials, the Australia Essential 8. Canada has a voluntary cybersecurity maturity model program as well. Because we want to make sure it's a level playing field for our DoD companies, that we're not going to require them to get a certification that we're not requiring a competitor who might be in the UK. So it is becoming a DoD standard globally for all manufacturers, but we have a great deal of interest with our 5I partners specifically on them actually implementing the CMMC in their countries of origin. Like Canada, if there's a defense contractor in Canada, the Canadian Commercial Corporation will actually go to the CMMC AB training and get certified to train and certify the companies within Canada. to do work. So I hope I answered that question.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is Katie just mentioned that only 0.6% of the organizations will need to meet level 4 and 5. Is that for the first year of rollout or overall?
Overall. So
Okay.
we really need to stop and think about, and part of this whole process is, as we have been doing this, we have been rewriting. I don't know if anybody is, if you go to the Defense Acquisition University website, there is something called the Adaptive Acquisition Framework. So as we're helping industry change their culture about security, we internal to the Department of Defense have had to change how we look at security. You know, in the first few slides of that deck, we say that there are 3 pillars to acquisition: cost, schedule, and performance. Security has to become foundational. There is no point to building a contract about cost if the capability is exfilled by the time of delivery. The cost has no value because the adversary has it. We'd have to go back and build it all again. The same with schedule. If it's not secure, what does it matter if it met the scheduled date of delivery if the adversary has it or your competitor has it? And it doesn't really matter about the requirement, the performance side, if, like I said, the adversary or competitor has it by the time it gets to marketplace. So to get the DoD in line, we had to re-look at how we did acquisition. So if you go to DAU, that Adaptive Acquisition Framework, that actually came from Mr. Fahey as well. We broke out the 5,000. So that 5,000 is the Department of Defense instruction on how PMs create acquisition strategy. The 5,000.01 is the roles and responsibilities. The 5,000.02 is all of the new stuff. So we have different, we have the middle tier of acquisition, we have the software acquisition pathway, and all of those have something called the 5,000.CS. So we have actually put the CMMC into our PM's hands and given them a very detailed walkthrough on how to look at what program they're working on. So the first thing in it says in the instruction is cybersecurity is foundational. Boom, that's acquisition 101 now. Secondarily, it says if you are transmitting CUI, your prime must be level 3. If the work that their subs are doing, you only need to have level 1. That way we understand and can internally to the government, just like our industry partners, understand the amount of money and resources we need to protect. Is it really worth protecting at a CMMC level 5 the manufacturing of a tire to go on a truck? Probably not. It's probably only worth spending the money at a level 1 to ensure that's done, whereas you would spend the higher dollar value to protect the critical technology. So as we're helping industry, we're also helping ourselves, and it's a new day, an entire culture shift for the whole of DoD. But yet again, when DoD decides something, industry has never let us down. Industry met when we needed ISO put into place. When we need a new capability in a time of war, or we need medical technology advancement at a time of war, the industrial base has always met what we've needed. It does that because when we're clear about the requirements, we're clear about the way and you're audited and measured, and we're clear about the amount of money we're willing to pay for that, it is seamless. And we're hoping that the CMMC is doing exactly that for cybersecurity.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, what if the prime is required to be at a level 3, but you're requesting product from a small business, which is a level 1? Because of the current flow down model, will the small business be required to be at a level 3?
No, only a level 1 if that's the type of work. And we are not putting the CMMC on COTS products. This is only about business, the sellers, not product at all. That's off the table because you're going through enough. to get certified for product. So let's say, you know, and I'm just going to use company A sells Microsoft to Prime, who's a level 3. That company would only need to be CMMC level 1. They're not selling anything with CUI. They're not dealing with CUI. The Prime may be using that Microsoft, you know, I'm using it as an example, product in controlled unclassified information. The Prime is then responsible to be level 3, not the sub. Does that answer that question clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. On the same note for level 1, will level 1 contractors be assessed on site?
Yes. They will be able to fill out a tool which the accreditation body will send to the auditor. So as your small business or company says you want to have an audit, you'll go to the CMMC AD website. You will say request an audit. There will be a list of auditors in your geographical area. You are free to reach out to whomever you want. They will all have a standard set of tools to use to help. So they will then send the small business the toolkit to help them get ready for the audit. They will send nothing that will be transmitted from the auditor to the accreditation body will have any proprietary information of a company. We're going to have that hashed and stored. So if you're at a level 3, your SSP will never leave off site. Your financial data will never leave off site. That is just what the auditor is physically sent there to do to protect your best interest. You will submit that report to the auditor. And then within 90 days of you submitting it, they have to do a physical audit. What they will be able to do on that CMMC level 1 is they will do a review of the information. They will do some due diligence immediately to authorize to get you the CMMC level 1 in a interim, so you know that it's in process, and then they have to physically come to your site. So yes, every company in the U.S. Department of Defense Industrial Base will need to have a site visit within 90 days of their audit application.
Okay, great. So as you've kind of alluded to here, and also have been mentioned as quoting in the past, one size does not fit all for security. The question is subs by what work they are doing need to meet a level 1 or 2. How do we know as a sub what level of CMMC should work to attain?
So we are doing some pathfinders right now. We want to make this information public, hopefully within the next month. We have working groups going on right now where we've taken some sample contracts from across the DoD, DLA, Transcom, a multitude of them, and mapping them out so people can look and say, okay, this is what a CMMC 1 contract might look like. This is what a CMMC 3 contract might look like. This is how there's a service contract I could talk about that we're using right now where the prime is a 3. We have multiple subs that are a 3, and then a bunch of subs who are a level 1. We're going to put all of those out for companies to be able to ingest. The whole process of the CMMC since it started has been very collaborative and transparent with industry. We haven't changed that. The only thing we're physically doing right now is we've had to shut the doors of the Pentagon for visitors, but we are still open to communication and collaboration. So you'll be seeing those come out.
Okay, that is the wrap up of Katie's. Oh.
252.204.7012. I'm so sorry, my brain just blipped on that. If you have that in your contract today, you are level 3. You're supposed to be doing those 110 controls of NIST. So, as companies go back, go to your contracting officer, go to your contracting shop, say, are we self-attesting to that DFAR clause today? If we are, we have to be prepared because we've been telling the government we're doing these things. Are we really doing them? And what we don't want to be doing is dinging companies right now. We want you to get better. We need you to get better. So let us know how we can help you. We're doing our best to get as the CMMC comes along, cybersecurity as a service products that will be, certified and tested to say, okay, I can't do all of these things at my facility. I don't have the staff, but I'm buying these approved software products to click into place. We'll have a listing of that. We're opening and we're training the PTACs because we want them to be a resource to say, okay, this is where your gaps are. Let's look to how you can solve these gaps. And, one of the gaps may be, and part of the tools that we'll be putting on the AV website are policy templates. How many small businesses understand cyber policy? Have any way to scope it, to put it into their handbook? We're actually going to put out draft policies that you can implement your company name and change a few things within it and adapt it so you have policy. It's one thing to say to industry, go and do. It's another to say, this is how you do it. And that's what the CMMC is all about. We don't want to harm our supply chain. We don't want to put you out of business. But, those small businesses that, I can't tell you that the amount of them come in and said to me, that the CMMC is a barrier too high. There are two things that are happening that put a chill up my spine and keep me up at night. And here's what they are. Quantum computing and 5G, right? By 2025, our adversaries will have quantum capability commercially available. What does that mean to small business? If you're encrypting, which not all small businesses or mid-sizes are encrypting, quantum breaks basic level encryption. So your company, if your security, your armor is encryption, the adversary can penetrate it. Secondarily, the way you access the internet today is, the adversaries have been doing these low and slow pulls over years. They have been pulling, from one contractor, another contractor that's doing another piece of the work, and they've been compiling the aggregate. They're getting all the data they want so they know the whole story. And what I mean by that is you may be, and I'll use an example, a company that creates the keypads for entry to a cleared facility. And you just do, that's all you do. The adversary's gone and exfilled how you built that control panel, the chips you've used in it, your operating guides, because I'm sure they're posted online, how you operate it. They've done all that. Well, they've also exfilled the other company that's actually got the work on where those pads, control pads, are located within a building. And they've also exfilled the company that has been doing the visitor approval requests for those spaces. And they know how to put all that data together to get what they want. That's why the CMMC is so needed and necessary, is those small businesses that think that they have nothing to do with cyber are the ones that actually are the most vulnerable. The adversary has been in those systems for years, and because they've been able to pull at a low frequency, you don't notice it. It's not something that's, you're not losing a petabyte of data over a weekend. They're pulling it low and slow. That is how they've gotten to us, and that is exactly why when 5G happens, right, so the low and slow won't be needed anymore, because the 5G capability opens the floodgate on how fast an adversary can get in, blunt force trauma, without the capability of basic level encryption and the bandwidth current requirements that we have right now. Imagine how vulnerable a small business will be to an adversary coming into their network, taking their IP, and your IP may not be, and I doubt highly it is, actually the widget that you've created. Your IP is how you run your accounting system, how you run your schedule for your employees, how you run your business as your intellectual property. That's what's made you the best of whatever you're doing. That's what the adversary wants. They want to know how you're doing what you're doing and why you're so good at it. The one thing I've said to people is there's a line of students dying to go to China to learn. And I've made some public statements about, how I see why China's developers, software developers, are 20 to 25 years behind us. They're where Microsoft was in the late 90s. Why? Because they really haven't had to develop anything. They've taken our R&D and built on top of it, to the point where there's, I say it frequently, there's a plane flying around China that looks just like the F-35 that they were able to launch in their production lines a year after the F-35 took flight, because they took our R&D. They're taking your intellectual property. They're taking what makes your company unique, and they're building on top of it. So we've got to get, those two big things in 2025 scare me for small businesses, because you may not think that you're susceptible. You may not think that you need cybersecurity in your business, but you absolutely do. And we absolutely need to get you prepared, because you are the exact thing that has made our nation the best on the planet. You have done everything right. Look where we are as a nation. The world, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. The world imitates our innovation, our technology, because we're the best. And to maintain that competitive edge, I need you to get prepared. That is the only reason that we're doing this. That year, 2025, sticks in my gut. It's also how long it will take me to get this implemented through the entirety of our acquisition system. So time is of the essence.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and I just want to let everyone know also, I realized we were flipping through the slides fairly quickly. And so we will make sure that everyone on today does receive a copy of the slides so that you can read the content yourself that Katie was just referring to.
Yeah, I'm a horrible slide goer. I didn't do a good job at that at all.
That's okay, no problem. We appreciate the content. So one last question, a little different topic than we've discussed so far. The question is, will the acquisition community be trained on implementation to ensure contracting officers are applying levels appropriately?
Absolutely. So we are currently working on training with DAU. That will be, we also have a new CUI policy out. If anybody hasn't seen that, it's DODI, I want to say it's 5144. That's out if you go to the website, but that's on a new policy and guidance on CUI, controlled unclassified information. We're working on the training for the acquisition force for DAU for both the CMMC for our simplified acquisition all the way up to our Cat 1 programs for our PMs and our cores. That'll be web-based training that will be ongoing as we train industry and we get industry ready. We also have to train our workforce, and we're also creating the new CUI desk book guide for not just industry, but for us in the department as well, because that's been a big thing. We needed to get a more clearly defined marking policy and classification policy.
Okay, great. Well, we have a lot of other really good questions that have come through here online, so we will absolutely do our best. If there are questions that our team here and working with the PTAC cannot answer specifically, we'll do our best to work with Katie's office to try to get some answers out to those who asked the question.
So if you've asked a question, please submit them to me. What we can do is we have a lot of FAQs, frequently asked questions, on our website to date. Whatever isn't answered, if you submit those additional questions, give us a day or two, but we'll get those answers posted on the FAQs on the website.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, we thank you so much for your time today, Katie. We know you are a very busy woman out there getting this information out into the market, and I think today's session was extremely valuable to those that attended.
Well, so thank you all. Please do not forget, I work for you. You're the U.S. taxpayer. You don't need to thank me. This is my job, and it is my honor. You guys are doing the hard work. Between the PTACs and our industry partners, you all do the hard work. We don't thank you guys enough for doing what you do. And as a mom, as a military mommy, a military spouse for the better part of 16 years, thank you for doing what you do every day. Because those young men and women out there that volunteer to protect our freedom, without you, your passion, your dedication, they put their lives on the line. And thank you for doing the hard work, the thankless job of working with the bureaucracy, working through all of our regulations, and staying passionate about the mission. And we as a nation owe you a debt of gratitude. This little 4'11", short Lebanese, Italian, Polish girl from upstate New York is very grateful for your effort, your time, your dedication, and please do not give up on us.
Okay, hopefully that was helpful for everyone today. As Katie admitted to when she presented for